Welcome to the Being Resilient podcast with your host, Stephanie Olson. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Being Resilient podcast. I am so excited because I have an amazing, I don't want to say old friend, but dear longtime friend, right?
Yes, works for me.
Treva Baltes is here. I just want to share a little bit about her before we get started. Treva Baltes lives in the sweetest place on earth, Hershey, Pennsylvania, with her husband, David, and two daughters, Eva Monet and Avery. After graduating with a business degree and music minor, she enjoyed a rewarding career in corporate America that expanded over 25 years. It wasn't until she and David celebrated their 20th anniversary that they welcomed their first child through international adoption. 7 years later, they found themselves back in China, welcoming their second daughter. Nowadays, you'll find Treva leading worship in her church and running her home-based business. She builds belief, supporting and inspiring women entrepreneurs. I love that. She loves spending time with her family and friends, a pastor's wife for 31 years, connecting with people and celebrating the diverse ways God designed us is a joy. She truly believes we were made for community. So welcome, Treva, to the podcast. I am so glad that you're here. Treva and I have been friends for years, and we just don't get to see each other as often because she lives on the sweetest place on earth. So
It's a nice place to visit.
Yes. Okay. So Treva, I know that you have just an amazing story, and I think it would be so good for our listeners to hear it and just really connect with your journey. So share your story a little bit with us.
Okay. Well, I was in Pennsylvania, actually, in another area by Philadelphia, and met my husband. He was a pastor, youth pastor, fell in love, got married. And again, I was in corporate America. So really my focus was on my career. My husband, I was 26, my husband was almost 28, and we were really enjoying ministry. I was traveling a lot for my job and just embracing opportunities as they would come available to me. So I was at a place where eventually my friends started to have children, right? So around my 30s, I'm like, because I really did want to be a mama, and my husband wanted to be a father. We had plans on being that family that actually did have, 5
children.
Yeah.
Fence. Yeah.
So that I wasn't opposed to that, but I was in a very demanding career and enjoyed those challenges. Truly, I enjoyed developing, and they had wonderful training. And but I found it around 30 years of age. I was like, this is not quite, I really sensed God had more for us. And so we began to really start our journey of wanting to be open to having children, and felt that God was going to bless us, and it did not happen. And so my husband laughs. He says, Treva had charts and schedules, and I was on a mission.
You're a type A. You're like me, type A planners. I mean, we're just going to make this happen, and God, you can follow along, right?
Yeah, it's funny. I always said I was a type A that wanted to be a type B. I mean, I genuinely, it's funny that you say that, because there's definitely a drive there. And yet I kind of felt I'm a kind of a soft driver. Like when one of my strengths, if you've ever done strength finders through Gallup, one of my strengths is focus, achiever, maximizer. I mean, those three right there, that'll give you some calendars and schedules. Right. And so I did really feel like, I'm healthy. Why can't I not have get pregnant? So we did begin to see some specialists and started to do some not invasive things, but began to try to assist in the process, and still not getting pregnant. In the middle of that, my mom, she had breast cancer, and she was then re-diagnosed. It metastasized from breast cancer to it metastasized to her brain. Wow. So now I'm at a place where we had, now I'm like, okay, I knew that I sensed that the time was short, and I will tell you, our faith in our home is very, very special to us. It's foundational to how we do process our life. Right. So I was then going to make it happen. And the job that I had, I will tell you, I worked at that time in the pharmaceutical industry. So I was at one doctor's, and I just walked down the hall to a doctor
Wow.
that we had visited, and talked to them about some other more serious and more expensive processes, and told them the situation with my mom, because I wanted my mom, she was an amazing woman, I wanted her to be a grandma before she passed away.
Yeah.
And in talking with the doctors, they said, this is probably not the time. The stress that you're going to have, if you've already had a struggle getting pregnant, you're probably going to struggle. And this is probably not the time. And I took that back and I prayed about it. And I really had a peace. Now, I will tell you, Stephanie, like many women, as you're trying to get pregnant, I did have some months that were more challenging. But I did not struggle like some women struggle. And I feel like, because I found, then this is a really important issue that this is for me. Okay. Everybody's journey is different. So I don't pretend my upbringing was different. Who I am was different. God wired me differently. So I am not saying that someone should respond like I did, but my identity I believe was in God. And I just sensed, having already went through a walk with my mom with cancer, I really did believe that God was holding us in his hands. And so I chose not to go forward with the process, because there were some things there's some things with those processes that were unsettling to me personally.
Sure.
Again, it's a personal choice, a decision on how you and your family go forward. But I didn't feel settled. There was something, so I was good with that. And what's neat is if I had become pregnant, I would not have had the ability to lift and carry my mom. And there were some things that happened it took about another year and a half. She passed away at 59. There were some things physically that I needed to do to assist her. She lived in Michigan. I lived in Pennsylvania. So I would travel back and forth once or twice a month. I took a couple leaves of absences. Thankfully, my employers, they were wonderful to work with me. But she passed away, and I realized that was the right decision for our family. Well, then we relocated to the state of Nebraska, which is where I met you. Go Big Red. And that is where we began, instead of looking at the symptoms, we actually began, my husband wanted to understand why we were not getting pregnant. And I had a friend, my husband was a pastor at a church, and she actually worked in a office that actually helped women who were struggling with pregnancies.
Mm-hmm.
And again, another God answered prayer. So we were able to uncover why I wasn't getting pregnant. Now, let me tell you, now we're talking many, many years at this point. Okay. I'm well into my 30s. Okay. Let's just say that. And I'm past my 30s. But what's interesting is I saw a documentary, and it was called The Dying Rooms. And I invite you to look it up. It moved me. This is when my mom was ill. I was at her home. My dad had cable TV, 50,000 channels. And I do not believe it was by chance, but I came across this particular documentary. You can look it up. Undercover British journalists were in particular orphanages, and they uncovered some things that needed to be changed with the way these children were cared for. And I'll just go that far. It was a very disturbing, and I could not get that out of my mind. I did not know that this type of situation existed. You can call me ignorant. I was. I didn't know. And the Lord pricked my heart in a way, Stephanie, I kept thinking, well, I'm not that great. Why do I need to have the DNA of me? My husband, amazing as he is, why do we have to have the DNA of us? I really don't care that my child has to look like me or him. But again, that's how I'm wired. All right. So again, I want to reiterate that, because this is not any shaming or guilt or anything on anyone else. This is my journey, my story.
Absolutely.
And it was really freeing, actually. So then one time, this missionary comes, and he's got pictures of what he did in again, Asian country, and ways in which they cared for children who did not have parents. And I remember picking this up and walking over to my husband and saying, David, and just starting to cry. Wow. David, you need to look at this. I can see myself being a mom of any of these children. And at that point, to my recollection, they were all girls. So fast forward, now we're in Lincoln, Nebraska, and finding out it was right before, the doctor did not know this, it was right before my 50th birthday.
Wow.
Excuse me, 40th birthday. Yeah, I'm not.
Okay.
Yeah, 40th birthday.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm fast forwarding a lot. So it was right before my 40th birthday. And he basically said to me, based on all the tests and everything that we've done, your body, it does not, the opportunity for you to actually get pregnant are really that does not look, unless it was a divine intervention, you would not be able to be pregnant. And so I walked out of there. And I want to also say it's really important that my grieving of not getting pregnant is a different process than what we went through to be adopted, to have be adoptive parents. There's separate issues, and that adoptive child does not replace a biological child. And God had already planted in my heart to mother a child that did not look like me, did not come from where I was from. And so I can always look into we're now adoptive parents. I can look into my girl's face and I can say without hesitance, I love that you are my daughter. You are my daughter. Now, so at that point, then I started to talk to my husband. There's a ministry called Show Hope, and they would help people with scholarships. And Stephen Curtis Chapman and his wife, Mary Beth, they have adopted. And so they had put this video out with this song. He's a songwriter, Christian, and so again, a lot of, you can romanticize things, and we address that later. But the bottom line is God was absolutely calling us to adopt. The next process is, and even before we knew we couldn't get pregnant, years before that, when we were just starting the journey, I actually invited my husband to go with me to Bethany Christian Services, where they had an adoption seminar. This is before we even knew we could have children, just because, I don't know,
God just starts to prepare at a very early, he's amazing that way. Yes.
Yes. And I remember at that point, the one big question is, are you going to go domestic or international? Because they serve both families. And I didn't know what would I do? What would we do? And so that was the process then. And I will tell you, it wasn't a hard decision for us. It's really a leading. And I really absolutely believe that it was seeing the documentary and just the path. And when my mom, before she died, we had met a couple, we were shopping in Pennsylvania. And again, it was a family it was really when China had just opened up their adoption process. And they had adopted a little girl who was Asian. And my mom we sat and we at a restaurant and talking to this family. It was an ice cream shop. And she's like, Treva, look at how lovely. So again, these things that God just puts in your path, right?
Right.
And so we began the journey. And in July of, when it was 2006, we actually gave our official paperwork, submitted it. There's a long process you have to do a home study, but then for the international process, it's the United States and whatever country you're working with, there's processes, because you need to make sure that you're safe.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
People, and it took us over 6 years actually to complete our first adoption, because China was running very quickly.
Wow.
And it began to slow down because the country had revamped their program after this documentary came out. They had revamped their program, and it became a country where if you went to China and you had gone through the process, you went there, you received your child at that first meeting. You didn't, go back home and go back and travel back and forth. Right. And so it was a very straightforward process once you went through all of the checks and the balances to make sure that you, again, were a healthy family and we're going to take care of this child properly. So it began to run very well. And again, China had a one-child policy in their country, which unfortunately meant that many little girls were the children that were in these orphanages. And so we logged in and we're on our way. Unfortunately, it took a lot longer. So that was a process in itself.
Yeah.
So eventually we did receive our first child in 2010. Eva Monet Jaiwan was her Chinese name. And she was 11 months of age when we actually met her. In fact, we celebrate next week, the day that we were first notified and saw her.
That's fantastic. I love that.
Yeah. So that's our there's a story in a nutshell.
It's so interesting because I remember very definitively when you were going through that, there's trauma in not being able to get pregnant or not having that, you just don't know what's going to happen. And I always had trouble staying pregnant. I could get pregnant, but I couldn't stay pregnant. So we went through 4 miscarriages during very similar time that you and that we were going through that. And I would love for you to speak to that pain and just a little bit about, how that feels when you're seeing all of those people around you celebrating the birth of their children and all of that stuff. And you still have to be happy, but it's so challenging.
Yeah. So first of all, let me say, I don't know the pain of getting a positive pregnancy test and then losing that baby.
Yeah.
So for that, Stephanie, I apologize. I just my heart, I say sorry for you. I grieve with you, truly.
Yes.
Because that's a loss.
It is.
That is a loss to you.
Truly, yes.
And so I don't know that kind of pain. So the Lord spared me in that way. My journey looks different. So I think that's an important difference there. The other thing I would say is I believe, and I'm not trying to be a Pollyanna or pretend. Did I cry on, certain months when, how many pregnancy tests I took? And I was like, I think this is the month. And then literally the next day, the pregnancy test, I realized I wasn't pregnant. I didn't even have to spend the money on the test. But I will tell you, I remember so many people, this is so funny because we were in a larger church, right? And people would pull me aside, Treva, I need to talk to you. And I knew what they were going to tell me. I'm pregnant. And it was so kind and thoughtful. And they would say, I want to let you know that we're going to have a baby. And I just want to tell you separately. And which is just, again, so gracious of them. And I can say without hesitation, genuinely happy for them. I can tell you, I don't remember one time that I ever cried out of sorry for me when I heard that, like go home and cry. I truly can't say that because every life is a joy and they were blessed. And I really believe because my faith in God and reading his word and understanding the character of God and who he is, I knew that he loved me and he had a plan for us. And also, Stephanie, I feel this calling on my life. Like, I just can't even begin to tell you that I believe that God created me to be a mother that was an adoptive mom. And for whatever reason, you don't really know the story of why the child is in the place that they are. Right. In the children's home, orphanage, whatever you choose to call that. I don't give my daughters, because now I have 2 daughters, but I don't give them these answers. But what I will tell you to you and the moms that have had kids, I could go to baby showers, celebrate them, and I was happy for them. Wow. It was a joy.
You are a much stronger woman than I was. I will say that right now, because I really struggled with that. I will never forget. I had just my first loss. I actually had to give birth to the baby because I was 5 months pregnant. So I had to give birth, held this little baby boy in my hand. And then the next 3 were, earlier term miscarriages. And I will never forget, I was in the bathroom one day. I had just found out that I had lost the baby. And one of my friends knew I had just lost the baby. And she burst into the bathroom and said, God has just blessed us so much. We're having another baby. And it just punched me in the gut because I heard 2 things. I heard we're not blessed.
Mhm.
And why is God allowing all of this to, and so I love that you had this peace and you had this knowing, because I really and I was also in a very different place spiritually and struggling with other things as well. But yeah, I love that he gave you that.
And Stephanie, let me say to you, your feelings are legitimate. Like that is a legitimate, natural. No,
Yeah.
there's no shame in that. My sister went through a very similar situation. About 5.5 months, again, birthed that baby,
Wow.
and it crushed her.
Yeah.
I mean, and I couldn't say to her, I'd never been pregnant. I couldn't say to her, oh, I know how you feel.
Right.
No, I don't know how you feel. And you're trying to be gentle. And I'm so sorry that happened to you, because yeah, I don't, and again, I don't know that situation, but what I will say to you is legit. So that's where I say, I didn't have to grieve that part. There was never any child that I ever felt growing in me or had a, what is it? 1 line or 2 lines? I forget. The
2
stick.
lines, I think, is yes. I think.
Yeah.
I think.
I never got 2 lines. So it's a different journey.
Yeah.
And so for that, I do believe, for me personally, and in our journey, why God, could I have ever been pregnant? Perhaps I could have, and not known it, but I didn't ever have that. Now I do know what it's like when, while we were in the waiting time, if I may share, we were waiting for Eva Monet. There was a time when we were approached with an opportunity to adopt domestically. And when you adopt, they want you to keep the distance between a child, that if for some reason while you're waiting, you were to become pregnant, there needs to be a year between those children. And the reason is because a child that you receive has gone through trauma.
Absolutely.
Just because you have not been there, just because they may be 11 months of age,
That's
I'm so sorry, but they have gone through trauma. And if you do not know that, please don't adopt. I'm just going to say that.
Right.
Or get yourself educated. But the point is you really need that time. You do need that time to that child to attach to you, to bond with you. But anyway, we were open to the opportunity. It was taking so long. A family came, or a pastor's, and they had a young girl that did get pregnant. And can I tell you, Stephanie, like, I didn't know this situation, but I was immediately like, yes, we will. And so my husband's open. And so we went away to this conference. And the whole time we're at this conference, I'm like, Lord, this could be our child. Wow. And so they wanted to set up a meeting with this girl, and they were like, yes. And we submitted the family, a little booklet about our family. And then she read them through, and she chose us. And this was all through the church. It wasn't through an agency. But she thought that her family life was a situation where it would have been they thought, and she was thinking this could be a wise choice. She didn't have the family supports network. So they thought perhaps this would be the best decision for her and for that child. So wouldn't you know, we came back and we didn't hear from them. She said, and we were supposed to go up to another state. And when we got back, I think it was that Monday, we called because I couldn't wait any longer. And they said, no, she's decided to keep the child. Wow. And I will say, I did have out of any other situation, I realized I had already become attached to this, and I didn't know it was a girl or boy, but didn't matter. So I in that sense, I can understand. And I did grieve that. And yet, then I heard she had a little boy, and they were living and established, and the church was really supporting them. And so for that mama, that was the right decision for her. Right. And, I don't know her, never met her, but I did grieve that. That was different. Well, I was saying, then that happened a second time, but we were ready. We were moving out of the state, and our adoption then was becoming within that window. And we were offered the opportunity. Would you consider this family? It was a family member, again, got pregnant. We didn't have the peace at that time, but we referred them to another family who had adopted 2 kiddos. And wouldn't you know, they ended up adopting this little girl. And if we had adopted this little girl, Eva Monet would not be our daughter. And it would have changed it.
Yes. I love that you said that, because God has a plan that we cannot, I
Mhm.
mean, we
True.
can't know.
It's true.
And some of the things that he takes us through, and I just want to go back really briefly. I love that you said this is your journey, this is your story, because everybody has a different experience.
Mhm.
Everybody has a different journey, and the feelings that we feel through those journeys are never wrong. How we feel can never be wrong. And so I think that's important to say, but God wastes nothing. He wastes nothing. And
Good.
everything prepares us for that moment that he finally says, okay, I said no, because here's a greater yes.
That's good. Okay, that's really good.
I love
So
that.
good.
Oh, that is
Mhm.
so awesome. So share the story, if you would, about Eva Monet bonding with David, because I think that's a great story. And it's an important story because I think so many times adoptive parents, there is trauma. There
There.
is trauma. We know that the first 5 years of childhood is really important. And so we also know that if there is a child who is away from their biological parents for whatever reason, that's a
Mhm.
traumatic experience,
That's right. Mhm.
aside from anything else that might happen.
That's
And
right.
so attachment and bonding might look very different for
Mhm.
adoptive parents than it might for biological parents. And
True.
that's so important to know. So I love the story. I love the story of David. So if you would
Yeah.
share that.
So, okay, so we've adopted twice. And so both the adoptions were very unique, different because Eva Monet was 11 months. Avery Noel
It was
Guanyao.
Avery, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
So the difference is she was 3 years and 8 months. So she was
Yes.
almost 4 years of age. She spoke Mandarin. She had her own personality. She was considered, she was a waiting child. So she had already had surgery, a cleft lip, cleft palate. And Eva Monet would have been considered a healthy child track. But so Eva Monet, when we had her, she was like 15 pounds at 11 months. I put her in a sling, at close body contact. David carried her. We both, there were no differences. She took to both of us in a way. It was really beautiful. I just still remember, I was telling her the other day, a mama had her, child in a sling, and she's just looking at her. I said, you used to peek up at me, and it was a sweet thing. And so any kind of, they talk about touching. And one of the things they talk about in attachment and bonding is that you revert them back. If they've learned to actually feed themselves, you actually, because food is a necessity for them, they're not going to love you. They don't understand that
Right.
you help them. You smell differently, you look differently, you have blue eyes, you have brown eyes, many facilities have, of course, more female to male. And so, but even when that attention and she didn't, but we did feed her everything we did for her. With Avery Noel, she was very different because of the fact that the communication, there's a barrier. She already was feeding herself. She was walking, and she had this little spicy personality. I mean, and there was a charmingness. There's a charm to her. And I don't know, a lot of times as people, even to this day, the things that we're validated on, we realize that we're received by it. And then we want to continue to do it for us because we all have this, we want to be accepted. Right.
Yeah.
But Avery, our second trip, it was Eva Monet. In fact, when we landed in China, we were flying through, she had turned 8 years of age when we landed in China. So it was super special that now she's going back to China where she was born. And we were going to visit really her country. And It was a beautiful thing. So that's a neat little detail. But Avery, when we met her, she came to me. She was very hesitant. Her personality was looking at me, kind of just kind of reviewing, watching. And then there's this slide, and she allowed me to take her and walk her over to the side. And she went down the slide, and she got up, and she allowed me to pick her up. And from then on, she allowed me to hold her and to touch her and just to do the slide. And then because Eva Monet was there, she would play with her. So Eva Monet was also a big part as big sister. Sure. And she's used to being around other kids. There were other kids when you receive your child, it can be different, but many times we were in a room with other parents. Some children are crying.
Sure.
Some children are just watching, and that's what Avery did. She watched. But she didn't want anything to do with David. She just kind of like, she would give him looks and she would scowl at him, and she did not want him. He would, one thing is we're very cognizant of is don't get in their face. How would you like it when you first met as an adult? Hi, how are you doing? And get in your face? No.
Right.
Because our natural, we know that doesn't feel safe. So you're very, you're trying to be gentle in the way you approach them. And
David is a naturally gentle man. I mean, he is just, he's just sweet. And yes, he really is.
He's got a big laugh, so in fact, initially we don't make sure we don't scare with, like, he likes to laugh, but he's not a big towering guy, like,
right.
So in that sense, and here's what he said, even after, so all the while we were in China, there were a few times she allowed him to hold her a little bit, but it was not her preference. And so we were very cognizant of that. And it was me. She wanted me. And when we came back from China, we would before we go to bed at night, we would do this family hug kind of thing. That's just what we do. And I would hold her, and Eva Monet would be there, and David would be there. And she would just literally, she would give him the eye. And, and he'd say, Treva, that we'd walk out of the room like, David, I just like, if she would have done that to me, I don't know.
Yeah.
But he's like, it's okay. I'm parenting the long game here.
I love that.
And so now, it was just through a process of little by little by little. I remember I had to go out. So if you've not had someone attached to your hip for a few years, right now, Eva Monet and I were really close, but she was now heavier for me to hold her.
Sure.
But now was where we came back and I needed to go get just a prescription. And I'm like, I got to go. Just give me 10 minutes. Literally, it was like 5 minutes. Give me 10 minutes. I just need 10 minutes. And she did not respond well to that. And so when I came back, I came in the room, even when I was like, you are never leaving. You're not doing that again. And again, I wasn't trying to harm her.
Yeah.
But we learned through that. So the point is we make mistakes as parents. We don't, there's things we learn, and we needed to remember she has gone through trauma. She has left her country.
Right.
And we went through, and I will tell you, it is a decision. And I did joke around this, don't adopt. I didn't mean that in a crass way, but truly not everyone is meant to adopt.
Right. No.
And that is one of the benefits of going through a process, a very long process. It's to vet you if you're safe, your family. Will your extended family receive this child? No child needs to feel it's not their decision to be born.
Right.
They did not make any decisions, and they're dependent on us. And so they need to be safe people, but also not everyone is wired to adopt or to be parents, or God has not called me to be a foster parent. That's a different thing.
And that's okay. I think that's a really important piece, because so many, especially in the foster care community, I hear, you should be a foster parent, and just this is something every Christian should do. I've heard people say that. It is not. It's God calls us to those things. So yes, thank you.
You could do more damage.
Absolutely.
And there's certainly training, and we are required to go through training. And then even through our first adoption, there was additional training that they started to require, but we weren't, because we were not under the HEG mandate. It was earlier on, but we went through it anyway, because our decision why would we not want to equip ourselves as best as possible? Because I had never gone through the trauma she had.
Right.
So with my girls, now I have almost a 12-year-old in December, even when I was 12, and Avery will be 7.5. We talk very openly. I mean, obviously we look different, right? But I don't ever want her to feel she's going to harm me by ever, as she's growing older, to say the word biological mom, because I will tell you, when we began to talk about adoption, we went to the woman who helped me to figure out why I wasn't pregnant. I went to an adoption celebration and a seminar, and it was an adoptee, it was an adoptive mom and a biological mom, and they told their story from their own viewpoint.
Wow.
And because of that, what that helped me is it helped me to understand why it's important for an adopted child, if they want to, why to have to know who their mom or dad is, to have connection, not just for medical reasons,
Right.
for them to actually, there is something there that I cannot replace. And I'm okay with that.
Yes. Yes.
And I need, or if I'm not, I need to get good with it, because it is not about me at that point. If I love that child, it is about them and being as whole and in healing and understanding why their adoptive mama and father are not with them, why they're not in there. And I will tell you, it is the heart of God that we are there. I absolutely, without hesitation, I look at my daughter's faces and I look at how God designed their eyes and their nose. And I just, they're beautiful. And I have no, there's nothing there of like, oh, I didn't carry a child. Oh, you don't have this. You don't have my hair. You don't have my eyes. There's none of that.
Yeah.
And I feel like a select, like, God, you chose me. Like, how did I become? And I don't even want to use, it's not lucky, because there's no luckiness in the fact that the trauma, there's none of that. People will say lucky girl. There's phrases people use, gotcha day. I don't even use that in my home. Not that, again, I know it's used across the industry, and I know it's not meant to be degrading, but I don't use that in my home because it's a forever family day.
Yes.
You're not a product. You're nothing. We are just so thankful that you are forever in our family. And Stephanie, I can tell you, it's God's calling in our life.
I love that.
I love it. So it's my children, I don't know what it's like to be a biological mom, but I don't know how I could, like, something happened in my understanding of how God loves me, the grace, something happened within my heart. Like there's like this space that I didn't have before. And my children teach me. And so I just want you to know, like, anyone, I know one of the questions, and statistically men struggle a little bit more, is what I've been told and read, to come on board with the process. Like, will I love this child enough? I will tell you, my husband, because again, it's calling, there's no one like his girls. They're his girls.
And the relationship with Avery and David today.
Oh, it's okay. So here's an example. My father-in-law had a very serious surgery. So my husband had to go out of town, and they live in Orlando. So he flew down, and we dropped him off, drove through Chick-fil-A. We're going to have a movie night, kind of a fun little thing with the girls and I, and we're driving into our development. And Avery says, Mama, I miss Daddy.
Oh.
And then through that week, she's like, I can't wait till Daddy's home. Well, then he had to go back. So now it's a month later. He just got back again on Friday, and he's in the car, and she's like, Daddy, Daddy. And both the girls are just like, Daddy. They're out of the car. They're crawling through the back. We have I'm lifting up the van, for them to get the luggage, and they're crawling out the back. People are watching like, what in the world? But they love him. She's like, Daddy, Baba. Well, we're in the car, and I'm working a convention, a women's conference this past weekend. And they say, Avery's like, Daddy, I am getting my pajamas on. We are watching a movie, and we are going to have cuddle time the whole time Mama's gone tonight. And she's like, that sounds great. And I also will tell you, I asked Avery. So there's the proof there's the proof, right? I can't make her do that. You have kids. You cannot make a 7-year-old see those things. That comes out of her own brain. But I will tell you, that's coming from her. And I asked her again, now she's been with us nearly 4 years this Christmas. So we had one at Thanksgiving, we were at China, and the second time we were in Christmas. So it's always the holiday. the best gift ever. And Noelle, her middle name is Noelle. So again, that Christmas, always the
Yes.
daughter's Noelle. It's all of, I really am big on names and what they mean.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, but I asked her, what about daddy? And she said, she was afraid. Like she wasn't sure about him. She was afraid. So she's understanding that she was not even 4, and she wasn't sure about him. And I will tell you, we named our girl Eva Monet. And if I can say this, again, it's always thinking about, I don't care if you're an adoptive parent or a biological parent, foster parent, you want to think about things that not just for now, but proactively, what are things that they're going to deal with through their trauma as they become aware, right?
Yes. Yes.
And we intentionally named her Eva Monet. Monet, because Monet being the painter, Monet created this amazing artwork. As someone, a consumer, I look at this beautiful piece of art, and then I begin to appreciate it for what it was and what the artist meant by, I can't change any brush stroke. It's what that artist had. So I think Eva Monet was created by God. He saw her in the womb. He's always been with her, always. She was his idea. And I want my girls to understand that even though I couldn't be with them from the beginning, God knows them, created them, and they are beautiful. They're not to be just like me. And they're not going to be exactly like their biological parents. God made them unique. They're designed and wired. And we will uncover through just getting to know them who God designed them to be. And we're going to work that through with them.
I love that.
So that's the meaning behind her name.
Oh, that's beautiful. And I'm really struck by the fact that if David had pushed that relationship with Avery, or if he had become bitter that she wasn't bonding with him, it would have changed everything.
You're exactly right.
Yeah. And I think so many times, and you said it, it's not about you. It's not about us. It's got to be about, that relationship and those kiddos and how God created. It's a journey. It's all a journey. And I love that. I love that.
May I give a resource that I think is valuable, not just for adoptive parents, but foster parents and biological parents. Dr. Karen Purvis, she actually has passed away. She, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, but there's a center in Texas. It's the Dr. Karen Purvis Institute for Child Development. She is known for her trust-based, it's TBRI, trust-based relational intervention. I just want to read what it is. Okay. There's a book called The Connected Child. I recommend it for absolutely every single parent out there. But she says, because it's really lending itself to what you just said here. And she says, when you connect to the heart of a child, everything is possible. And it says TBRI is designed to meet the complex needs of children who've experienced adversity, early harm, toxic stress, and or trauma. Because of their histories, it is often difficult for these children to trust the loving adults in their lives, which often results in perplexing behaviors. TBRI offers practical tools for parents, caregivers, teachers, or anyone who works with children to see the whole child in their care and help that child reach his or her highest potential. And so we know St. Francis of Assisi said, seek first to understand, then to be understood. This is no joke. You have to develop, they have to trust you because they're not robots.
No, absolutely.
Not robots.
And that trust is really hard when you're dealing with a traumatic childhood. That does not come naturally. And that is developed over time with a safe, trustworthy adult. I mean, that's right. Exactly how it happens. I will link that resource to this. So what advice then would you have for anybody who is going through this, whether it be struggling to get pregnant, who is considering adoption? What would you share with them?
Great question. I would say do your research. We wanted to adopt a second time, and we still went to an information session. So you were Bethany Christian Services. So find a reputable, and I can't stress enough, a reputable agency. So 3 agencies that I know of personally that I've worked with, Bethany Christian Services, they just this past year, we worked with them. They have programs in Pennsylvania and in other states where the resources that they can give you continue to go even after an adoption. But before, they'll have sessions where you can learn about adoption. CCAI, Chinese Children Adoption International, they're the largest international adoption agency. They're located in Centennial, Colorado. We went through them for our second agency because this is a Chinese husband and wife that ended up wanting to adopt and establish an agency, and we felt really comfortable through our waiting child adoption, but we use America World Adoption Association. They're amazing. They're out of McLean, Virginia, and they did our first adoption, and then they did our second home study. So I would say, first of all, get yourself educated. Go to seminars. You can actually find testimonies, adoptive parents, ask them questions, find friends that know adoptive families that have done it well. Now, and be aware that there is trauma. And so there's also, I mentioned Dr. Karen Purvis Institute, but there's also, like, honestly, adoption company with Mike and Kristen Berry. They have a blog and they do trauma training workshops. So I would say do not romanticize that you are their savior. If you're doing it to do that, you back up, stop, and realize that you cannot save the world. You are a part of their process, but it is a difficult thing, and it is not beautiful in some respects. And when we had the process was different through the second adoption, because again, you had an older child. And when you can't, I used to have my phone with the translator on it, and Avery was trying to communicate, and she was upset, and I didn't know what the problem was. And I would go, Mama loves you, Avery, please tell me what's wrong. And I would put it up to her face.
Oh, I love that.
And she would stop talking. And I'm like, Mama, and I would repeat again, and she would stop talking. And then sometimes she said something and the translator wouldn't translate it correctly. I knew a little bit and I knew some keywords, and we had a book. So there's a book that you can have if you don't know Mandarin or Spanish or whatever it is. So we did learn some key phrases. And so we could say certain things to make sure that, we hungry and fed and apologize and I love you. And so there's keywords, but essentially she didn't ask to be here.
Right.
And so I need to be well rested. So some tools. Okay. But so don't romanticize, because I'm not trying to scare you off, but I think it's very important for you to understand that this is a process. So you need to be very patient and understand that the discipline that you may have been brought up with is perhaps not the way you would work with this child.
Correct.
Look them in the eyes, get down at their level, touch them, if it feels safe, and say, I love you. I want to understand, and look at them and let them know your voice. I want to hear your voice. I want to understand you. This is truly, it's not about me.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
If you're a person that deep down, you don't have the capacity or the bandwidth in your life right now, you may want to adopt a child because you see the need. That is not the calling.
Correct.
That's the calling.
Yeah.
So I would say, do a lot of research, talk to individuals, think about the process, make sure you're with reputable companies. Agencies. I do know, actually through a dear friend of mine, that her sister and brother-in-law were paying an agency in another country, and it was going towards the groundskeeper's child. There was no
gosh, that's horrible.
It was shut down. It is horrible. And so I will tell you, there are places out there like that. That is why you make sure that you go, do your due diligence, and then, pray. And pray about it. And that's, you pray about it in the beginning, you pray in the middle, and I will tell you, God will direct you. And there will be, and also people say to us, we were waiting over 6 years for our first adoption to be completed. Why don't you change, Pastor? It's not a library card. God did not call, I'm not picking out different books. This is where God called us. The only time that we felt we were open was that, as far as was that domestic, that was just this, but then God shut the door.
Right. Right. And you were obedient to that. And I think
Yes.
that's the key, because if God's got something set in motion, it's going to be amazing, not smooth sailing.
Yeah, that's
Not,
right.
not
Yeah.
always rainbows and unicorns. I don't know. It's
No.
it's going to be good because it's God. And I think sometimes we do have that savior complex. And
That's
we
right.
do it with a lot of things. You know, if I will just save these people, or I will save this child. And I understand it. It's a noble idea, but
It
it's
is,
not
right.
reality. It's not
It's
reality.
not.
Yeah.
No, it's not. And the other thing is, because now one of my daughters had to have speech and some special services. You know, we thought
Sure.
she might be deaf actually in one ear. That was a concern. So there's things. So the other thing to remember, so another tip is you get information, it's translated, but they're also trying to have the child adopted. So you may not always have the full medical understanding. You have to be okay with that.
Right.
And you have to be willing, if God is calling, you have to be willing to go with the ride. And the other thing I would say is, don't set your child up at the same level. If your child's 7, perhaps because of what they've gone through, they may not be in the same place as another 7-year-old.
Absolutely.
And there's actually a quote. My husband gave this to me just recently. I thought it was so good. If you don't mind,
Please.
it was talking about, it says the people in your age group who did not experience life-altering trauma had an advantage over you. Your brain was focused on surviving while they were free to develop and grow. You might feel like you're behind because you were doing your best to survive. So that's the thing, is you're behind because you were doing the best you could survive. And so I guess my point would also be, the brain is rewired when a child is in trauma, they're closed up. And that's why trust-based parenting, you know, you have to, the child cannot, when you're like saying things at them and trying to be logical, a child will relate to you mostly on an emotional level, but their emotions are not intact because they've gone through trauma, and you have to assess where they're at. Right. And you may need to get, you have social workers that do come after you adopt. There's visits, 1-month visit, 6-month, months. And with China, we now are required to do, they just changed it. It used to be 2 years with Eva Monet, and it was 4 years with Avery, or 5 years. Now they changed it to 10 years. We have to send. Wow. Yeah. So some people are not happy with that. But here's the thing I would say to you is, it's important for you to comply with the guidelines of the agency, because here's why. The countries will rank the agency, and the relationship needs to stay healthy between country to country if you're going to do an international, because they'll rank them, and then they can pull back on allowing them to adopt as much. So what do we want? What's the goal here? We want our children to be in safe, healthy places. We don't want them to be institutionalized.
Right.
Now, China got to a place where there were so many children being adopted out, truly, because of one child policy. They changed that one child policy, and they began to have adoptions within their country. I'm okay. I want that child to be in a safe home if they can be in a country. Now, as a faith-based person, I will tell you, I want them to know about Jesus. I'm going to just tell you that. That's very important. But I will say to you, what we want is, I'm going to comply with that 10 years because I want the relationship between an agency and a place that could give a child a home. Absolutely. I want to always help that.
Absolutely.
So it's always about the child.
Yeah.
It's always about the child.
Goes back. It always goes back. And I think that is, as parents, just as parents of any child, it is hard sometimes to remember that and to put them first, and to, because we're human.
Yes.
We have this whole human problem, but
what is that about? I still have a human problem. Yeah.
But they are just so incredibly important. And I always remind myself, you know what? God loves them more than I do even.
It's true. It's
And
true.
so, yeah, he's got them.
And the thing I would say is, so when we say it's about the child, what we're not saying is in a marriage that now everything is around that child. So now
Right.
your marriage dissolves and the child now rules the roost. That's not what we're talking
No,
about. And some people misinterpret that.
that's a
That
good
is
point.
not what we're saying. But what we are saying, when you bring this child home, they will have these seasons, just as even a regular child just going through from elementary to middle school to
Right.
high school, there's changes, they're developing, they're trying to
Yes.
figure out who they are. So, but because actually, okay, so my husband just had a birthday on Sunday, and my daughter makes this poster, and on this poster, we put posters all around the house for anybody. And on one of the poster, Avery, she's like, it's going to be a great party, cool. And then she puts a cup of coffee and she crosses it out, and she has these lips and she crosses it out and it says, no, 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 no. And it says, no kissing mom. So I was like, apparently there's been too much coffee drinking and kissing around our house.
I guess.
Yeah, so shame on me. So I told my husband, I've got you covered. I'll get you a slip of coffee in a few cases when they're not looking. Okay. But the point is she's seeing that affection.
Yeah,
so
that's
you
important.
yeah. So you're obviously, you have to savor. There's things they'll learn through also knowing that they're in a secure home, I should say.
Right.
You're also, because we say to each other, I love your, I also actually have said to them, don't treat your dad,
Yep.
my husband, like that.
Yep, absolutely.
Don't do that. So what's funny is then last night we finally got to cutting the cake and doing the presents, and Avery, daddy, was laughing about the sign, and she said, go ahead, kiss mama 10 times. So deep down, so then he comes and kisses me 10 times. And then he was like, no, now kiss her 20 times. The point is this, deep down, there's something about, they actually do want to see that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Even I've got teenagers now, well, one adult child and then teenagers.
Yeah.
And, when we have a tendency to dance in the kitchen or, their response is always, ew, gross, go away, do that.
Yeah, that's right.
But they love it.
That's right.
They know that because that is happening, they're in a secure home. So I love that. No coffee though. That's a problem.
Yeah.
You may need to work on that one.
Yeah.
Well, I have just loved my time with you. This has just been amazing. So, is there a way if people want to get in touch with you or to learn more about adoption?
So I've been revamping. I have my own business, She Builds Belief, and but it's now coming out. I'm totally revamping it. So now I'm not under any other agency. So what I would say is just do Treva, Treva Baltes, Baltes @gmail.com. You can certainly email me there, and there'll be more to come as far as with She Builds Belief. It's really about inspiring women in their businesses and who they are, and again, how God designed them. My husband and I have taught about, and this is what I do with my girls too. I really love to see how people are wired. So there's actually assessments that you do, and the DISC model. So if you know anything like that, driver, and those kind of personalities, type A, type B. So those are the types that I like to inspire and help people. So, but if they're interested in adoption, really, I'm happy to just answer questions. And I don't have an adoption agency. I'm not connected. We have spoken for our adoption agency because we believe in it so much. So if anyone has any kind of, I would be happy to speak or share again. If someone has an event, I'm so passionate about it. Truly. They say, if you brings you to tears, it's something that God has wired you with. I'm open to anything like that. But my heart is to cheer people on. And so thank you. That's really, great. Stephanie, I love you and I believe in you. I love who you are, your boldness and resilience, and just your story. And I want, it's an honor to just cheer you on and the good work that you're doing. So thank you for just thinking that I could in any way partner with you, come alongside you. It's truly a pleasure.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Well, thank you so much, Treva. And we appreciate you coming on. And thank you, listeners. And we will see you next time for the Being Resilient podcast.